Hey friends, just for fun, for an entire year, I made a popular state meal for supper every week. 50 states, 50 meals. And we had just a few rules. We wanted to make sure it was popular or official, as authentic as possible, but not too expensive, and we wanted to have lots of fun doing it. We did them alphabetically, and we're starting off strong with the state of Alabama, shrimp and grits. These creamy, cheesy grits were a perfect combination with that shrimp and smoky bacon on top. I served them with some cornbread on the side, and this was one of my husband's favorite state meals. Now, on to Alaska, where we had salmon with zucchini and roasted potatoes. I've heard that zucchini is a popular veggie up in Alaska due to the short growing season. Well, it was a great side dish to this salmon for sure. And on to Arizona, where we had chimichangas, rice, and beans. Now, I said we wanted to make this not so expensive, so I will admit that I got these out of the freezer section, but I fried them up so they were nice and crispy. And now we're on to Arkansas, where we had biscuits and chocolate gravy with ham. I was so excited about this one because it's super unique for me. This salty ham was definitely a great pairing with this sweet chocolate gravy and biscuits. California Cobb salad, you guys, this was my favorite state meal by far. All of these veggies were pretty and delicious, and the dressing on this was a sweet mustard style dressing, and we even got our sourdough bread straight from Boudin's Bakery in San Francisco. On to Colorado, and we had the Denver omelet, the most embarrassing state meal for me because this omelet turned out so ugly. But a couple weeks later, we actually went to Denver, and I had a nice breakfast with their traditional chili sauce, so definitely made up for that one. On to Connecticut, and we had steamed cheeseburgers, and I had to make this makeshift steamer with a pan of boiling water, another pan inside with my hamburgers and cheese. I even steamed that cheese, and it got so soft, I just poured it on top of that burger. This was definitely a fun and interesting meal. Now on to Delaware, where we're having the Bobby, which is basically Thanksgiving dinner on a roll. Turkey, cranberries, and stuffing layered onto a nice, big, thick sandwich. Then we're headed to Florida, and we had the Cuban sandwich. And here I am again making a makeshift panini press with a cast iron skillet and a pan on top. These were ham and pork and pickles, definitely a delicious sandwich from Florida. And now we're headed to Georgia, where we had their delicious pimento cheese 3 ways, on a cold sandwich, on a grilled cheese, and with some veggies. I served some boiled peanuts on the side, and we even had a peach hand pie for dessert. I hope you guys are enjoying the video so far. I wanted to pause for just a quick second to tell you why we decided to do this. My husband and I love to travel. We love to go on road trips across the US, and we love to try different foods everywhere we go. In 2022, my husband was diagnosed as legally blind, and we knew that would put a damper on a little bit of our travel. We still love to go places, but we're just not able to do everything we used to do. So we wanted to bring some of that fun home, and I thought, what better way to do than to bring those meals into our home? So we did this challenge of 50 state meals in 50 weeks, and what a fun challenge it was. I hope you keep watching and keep enjoying some of these state meals that we tried every week. And now we're headed to Hawaii, and we're having their traditional salmon. I got this authentic seasoning packet called dashi from Amazon, and I added Spam, eggs, and some veggies to this. It was very similar to ramen, but it has a unique flavor. And now we're on to Idaho, where we had a loaded baked potato bar with all the toppings. This was a fun and easy state meal because you could really make it your own with all your favorite toppings. And now let's head to Illinois, where we had Chicago deep dish pizza. And boy, were we lucky because our son lives there, and he brought us a frozen Lou Malnati's pizza, so all we had to do is pop that in the oven. I served it with a salad alongside, and it was easy and delicious. Now let's head to Indiana, where we're having the pork tenderloin sandwich. I made these from scratch by pounding out a pork tenderloin, breading it, frying it in some oil, and adding all the toppings. We could all agree that this was definitely one of our favorite state meals and something that we would like to have again and again. Now let's head over to Iowa, and we're having some loose meat sandwiches. This is seasoned meat and onions, fried up, put on a bun with some mustard and pickles. We had these down in Iowa at a Made Right restaurant. These were very similar, very messy, and very tasty. And now we're headed to Kansas, and we're having Bierox. This is a traditional handheld sandwich made from ground beef and cabbage. I fried those up, added some seasonings, and then I rolled out some dinner rolls, added the filling, sealed this all up, and then we baked them until they were nice and golden brown. This was a unique recipe and really fun to make. And now we're headed down to Kentucky, and it happened to fall on the same week as the Kentucky Derby, so we're making a whole day of it. I made these cute little Benedictine sandwiches for lunch along with some mint juleps. We wore our fanciest hats and we watched the race, and then for supper, we had the Kentucky Hot Brown. We followed it up with dessert with these traditional Kentucky chess bars. What a fun day. And now we're headed down to Louisiana, and we had jambalaya and hush puppies. Now, I cheated a lot for this meal, and I used a Zatarain's packet, but their flavors are so good that I didn't regret it one bit. And now we headed out east to Maine, and we had lobster rolls. I was a little bit leery about this one because I got the lobster tails from Walmart, but they turned out great. This was not the most economical state meal, but it was one of my favorites. Now we're staying out east and headed to Maryland for some crab cakes. This was the first time I've ever used canned crab meat to make crab cakes, but they turned out great. I made this sauce for the top, served them with a salad and baked potato, and this was definitely a good state meal. And now we're headed on over to Massachusetts, and we're having clam chowder. This was my first time making clam chowder, but I have made it multiple times since then. You can find this full recipe on our YouTube channel because I loved it so much. It was creamy and salty and very delicious. And now we're headed next door to Michigan, and we're having pasties. Now I've had these in Michigan before, and they are so good. I use these pre-made pie crusts to make it a little bit easier, fill them up with the meat and carrots and potatoes, bake them until they were golden brown, and then I drench them with some delicious brown gravy. If you haven't had a pasty from Michigan, you gotta head over there and try these. They are well worth it. Now let's hop over to Minnesota and have their tater tot hot dish. Now when I was researching this, I found out that the difference between a casserole and a hot dish is that a hot dish is layered. So I'm layering this one, topping it all with those golden tater tots, baking it until it was nice and hot and bubbly. I've made this one before. I'm definitely going to make it again. You can view the full video on our YouTube channel, but who doesn't love a good Minnesota tater tot hot dish? Now let's head on down south to Mississippi and have some fried catfish, greens, and boiled peanuts. I fried this fish in my cast iron skillet till it was nice and golden brown, served some greens alongside, and any opportunity I have to have boiled peanuts, I'm taking it. Those things are so delicious. Look at how good and light and flaky this fish turned out. And next, we're headed to my husband's home state of Missouri, and of course, we're smoking some pork butts. We gave them a nice, generous dry rub, put them on that smoker for hours. Periodically sprayed them with apple juice and added some more wood chips.
Look at that beautiful smoke roll. Flavors in that.
We like to take these and finish them in the oven so they get nice and tender and stay very juicy. And look at that bone slide right out of that meat. We serve these on a sandwich with some coleslaw and some barbecue sauce. Now we're headed out west to Montana, and it just so happened to be the 4th of July. So I boiled up some corn, cooked up some steaks. They turned out so nice and juicy. This was a perfect state meal to have on the 4th of July. My husband approves. And now we're headed over to Nebraska, and we're having the Runza. This is very similar to the Kansas Bierox we had earlier. Seasoned meat and cabbage rolled up in some bread dough, except these are more rectangular, where the Bierox were rounded. We baked these until they were nice and golden brown, and this time I'm going to cut one up so you can see what they look like inside. Just as you imagined, seasoned meat and cabbage, but they were definitely delicious and very unique. And now we're headed over to Nevada, and you guys, the grocery store down the street from us has this pre-cooked prime rib that is buttery soft and delicious. We served it with some shrimp cocktail, and oh boy, was this a good state meal. And let's head back out east to New Hampshire, and we're having boiled dinner or corned beef and cabbage. This one takes me right back to my childhood where we had it every year for St. Patrick's Day. And now here's real life. This week we're headed all the way over to New Jersey.
And as you know, life doesn't always go as planned.
We were going to have the Taylor ham pork roll.
With eggs, Kaiser rolls and cheese.
But
We had a big storm. We lost all our power, or been without power for about 20 hours. And we
Empty
have
fridge.
a completely empty fridge. So we will do a reset. And that was New Jersey.
now we're back on track and headed to New Mexico, and we're having stacked enchiladas. These were corn tortillas dipped in enchilada sauce, layered with seasoned meat and cheese, topped with an egg. We serve these with beans, and my husband has been asking me to make this meal again and again ever since. And now we're headed to New York, and we're having New York style pizza. And my husband is so proud to take credit for this nice and easy state meal from Pizza Hut. And now we're headed to North Carolina, and we're having the North Carolina style cheeseburger. Now we have some family in North Carolina, and they suggested this ultra loaded cheeseburger, which has chili, coleslaw, onions, and mustard. This was a huge, thick burger, so messy to eat, and I'm about to embarrass myself, but here we go. I could barely fit this thing in my mouth. Look at how messy. I have to admit, though, this thing was delicious. Almost like a chili cheese dog, but you eat it on a burger. Now let's head over to North Dakota and make some lefse. Now this one is near and dear to my heart because I am part Norwegian. We make this every year for Christmas. I boiled up some potatoes, put them through my ricer to make the dough. That needed to chill overnight. Now the next day, we're going to put it on our lefse board and roll these out nice and thin. You can watch my whole how to make lefse video on YouTube. Once I have this rolled out nice and thin, we're going to bring over our lefse grill and cook this till it's nice and bubbly and just starting to get brown. And now my favorite way to eat this is with a little bit of butter and sugar sprinkled on top. My husband prefers brown sugar, but you can also eat it with lunch meat or with eggs inside. This is just a really versatile alternative to bread for the Norwegians. Now let's head over to Ohio and have some Skyline chili. Now I did find some frozen Skyline chili straight from Cincinnati at our local grocery store, so I used that so it'd be more authentic. I boiled up some noodles, added the chili, and then all the toppings. I believe this way that I'm serving it is called 5-way chili. It has beans, cheese, and onions. This was definitely a unique flavor. And now we're headed on down to Oklahoma, and we're having chicken fried steak. I served this with some mashed potatoes and green beans, and I drenched it with that delicious white gravy. I don't always try everything on camera, but this one looks so delicious. It is definitely Southern comfort food. Oklahoma at its finest. Here we go. It's probably really hot. Oh my goodness. That is so good. So good. And now we're headed out west to Oregon, and we're having Dungeness crab. And shout out to Walmart for having good seafood again. I served this with a salad and some potatoes on the side. Now we're headed on over to Pennsylvania, and we're having some Philly cheesesteaks. I fried up that steak with some onions. While that was cooking, I slathered on some Cheez Whiz on this nice hoagie bun, piled that meat high on there, added on some more Cheez Whiz, and this was definitely a delicious Philly cheesesteak sandwich. Now we're headed back out east to Rhode Island, and we're having Johnny Cakes. I had to order this white stone ground cornmeal online because I couldn't find it anywhere. It makes a batter like the consistency of mashed potatoes. These turned out very similar to pancakes. I served them with my favorite Mrs. Butterworth's alongside of a potato skillet with an egg on top, and this was a great breakfast for supper. Now we're headed on down to South Carolina, and we're having Low Country Boil. This is a favorite of ours. We have it as a tradition every year for Labor Day. Potatoes, shrimp, sausage, and corn. You can definitely not go wrong with a Low Country Boil. Now, South Dakota, you guys, Indian fried bread tacos, these were so good. This was the first time I have ever made them, but I fried this bread dough in some oil and then added all the taco toppings. You can find this full recipe on our YouTube channel because these were so good, I could not help but film the whole thing. I layered on some beans, seasoned meat, cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, just all the toppings. This is a super great alternative to a regular taco because this shell is so soft. Just a very delicious state meal. Way to go, South Dakota. And now we're headed to Tennessee and just listen to that sizzle. I made these Nashville hot chicken sandwiches by using lots of seasoning, pickles, and mayonnaise, and this was such a simple but delicious sandwich. Now we're headed to Texas and we're having some beef brisket. I made some Texas toast and piled on some beef brisket. Now, normally we get our brisket from William's dad, who makes the best brisket, but we didn't have any, so I got this at Walmart. It was not as good, but we served it with some beans and some macaroni and cheese, and this was definitely a fun Texas meal. Now let's head on over to Utah, and I made a Jell-O ring mold. I also made what they call funeral potatoes, what I would call cheesy potatoes. What's so funny about this is that we had friends over that night and they brought Jell-O too. So we had two Jell-Os that night. Now on to Vermont, and we're having some real Vermont maple syrup. I made some delicious blueberry pancakes, and we had breakfast for supper with this Vermont maple syrup. Now on to Virginia, and we're having the Smithfield ham. Now it happened to be the week of Thanksgiving, and this ham was the perfect meat to heat up with our Thanksgiving leftovers. Now on to Washington, and this one was so much fun. Researching Washington, of course, there's lots of seafood, but I really wanted to do something different, so I made this Dutch baby. It's basically like making a pancake batter, but then you cook it in some butter in your cast iron skillet in the oven. I'm going to give you a sneak peek of this halfway through, and you can't believe how big and fluffy this gets as it's cooking. And then once it's done, it gets so nice and golden brown. I'm going to pull this out of the oven. It does start to sink as it sits. It's very traditional to serve this with some melted butter, maybe some lemon juice, and some powdered sugar. I'm going to cut into this and show you what it looks like. This is basically like an eggy pancake that you can make in one pan in the oven. This was super unique, and I'm so glad I made it. The Seattle Dutch baby. Now on to West Virginia, and I made pepperoni rolls. These were made so miners could put them in their pockets and take them in the coal mines with them. I made these with Rhodes dinner rolls, mozzarella cheese, and pepperoni, and when they came out, I just dipped them in pizza sauce. They were so good. Hello, Wisconsin, my home state. Of course, we're cooking up these Johnsonville brats. I also got many different varieties of cheeses from the cheese store, made this nice Wisconsin-shaped cheese board, and enjoyed that brat. Yum. And we made it to the end, Wyoming bison burgers. I took this ground bison, made some cheeseburgers, and seasoned these with this McCormick hamburger seasoning. This stuff, I really recommend. It's so good. I served some French fries on the side. I topped these with some grilled onions. This was such a good, juicy burger. If you haven't tried bison, I totally recommend it. If you made it all the way to the end, guys, thanks so much for watching. And if you want to know what's next, it's state desserts. Check out our channel for more.